changes the dynamic and it's produced effects in society that are strange.
Okay.
Okay. And obviously, I mean, just a day-to-day effect. So, if a woman earns more than a man, that often creates, I mean, I sort of it creates conflicts.
It can, I'd imagine,
And so I understand that, you know, this change, you don't have the conceit of being targeted, it doesn't have to be seen as a singularly positive thing or a singularly negative thing. That matter. But so it's keeping all of that in mind. And obviously with the internet has changed culture, has changed another sort of setting there. So sort of with all this sort of background, I guess sort of specific question I have. The sort of around me, I see. But this applies, I think, both to men and women, but I'll ask it like, the inside of it. Is that there's like a sort of a distrust and sort of either cycles of courtship or just a general distrust between sort of the genders. And I guess what would you say to that?
Trying to give you feel. You know, it's interesting, man. You know, whenever you're talking about personality, we have to recognize that personality, it spans such a vast range of religiously acceptable ways of being. So like you mentioned about like earning. Khadija, she earned more than the Prophet ﷺ. He was working in her employ. She proposed to him. This is the real story. This isn't like a 2023 relaunch of the story, right? She proposed to him. In fact, she sent a friend of hers, right? Because she was impressed with the Prophet ﷺ. And also, I want you to think about the dignity of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Khadija at that time was one of the wealthiest women of Quraysh. She was looking for someone to operate her trade caravans. And someone told her about this man, Muhammad. He's very honest. He's a skillful business person. He'll be good. She was so impressed with him. Now she's 15 years his senior. He's 40 and she's a widow. He's 25, never married before. She was so impressed with him. She thought, I wonder if he would be interested in marrying me. Let's just stop for a minute. I always think in a classist world, how impressive does a man have to be for his employer, who is infinitely more wealthy, infinitely wealthier than he, to think, I wonder if he would marry me. Khadija sends a friend to the Prophet ﷺ, and it's so funny, man. 1400 years and things haven't changed much. She said, don't tell him it's me. People still do this, right? Don't tell him it's me. Just see what he thinks about marriage. Like these vague, don't tell him it's me. Just see if, see if he's thinking about it. So the friend goes to the Prophet and says, Muhammad, do you ever think about getting married? The Prophet says, I think about it, but I'm not able to marry right now. And she said, why not? He said, because I don't have any money. Now he was working for Khadija, but look at the character of the Prophet. Most of the money he would earn, he would give to Abu Talib, his uncle, who supported him when he was an orphan. Right? Abu Talib was he had the perennial dilemma of being a man with a large family who was respected and esteemed, but he was not very wealthy. But he was very honored. So like when you read about Abu Talib, you would think he was very rich. No, he was just very respected. He was a well-respected person, but he wasn't a very wealthy person. So the Prophet ﷺ would take his money and give it to Abu Talib to support the large family of Abu Talib, right? Khadijah's friend, seeing an opportunity, she decided to just shoot the shot. She said, what if somebody wanted to marry you and money wasn't an issue for them? Right? What if somebody wanted to marry you and they had money? And what I find strange, when we like all these discussions we're having contemporarily, the Prophet ﷺ wasn't like, no, my male ego is just too fragile for that. What do you mean? I mean, I don't have money, so you have the money. You know what he said? He said, that would be great. Sallallahu alayhi. He said, if they had the money, that would be great. I consider that, right? And then she said, Khadija bint Khuwaylid, Khadija, radiallahu anha, she's interested in marrying you. The Prophet ﷺ accepted her proposal, right? And Abbas, his uncle, was his, because you know, men also had walis, right? Abbas was the wali of the Prophet ﷺ, right? They contracted the marriage and they, you know, they put it together. So my point is, even the foundational story that, I mean, this was, you know, the Prophet ﷺ was married to Khadijah for 25 years, right? He was married to her for 25 years. In a monogamous marriage. It wasn't what now we see what Sister Rhonda does in her spare time. She's a serious product specialist here, you know. So even the foundational story is not the stereotypical story of, you know, the patriarchal male supporting the wife, right? Now, I think we are living in a time that we have to be very intentional about marriage. We have to be very intentional about marriage because I think we live in a time and place in which it's easy for a person not to see the necessity of marriage, right? For a person to say, right? I mean, when you look at what Allah describes as men's proper roles in their families. And if I were to boil it down to two characteristics, provision, protection. Right? That is provision, protection. You have many women who don't see the necessity of either of those. They have protection because they live in a modern civil society. They have access to security, police forces. It's not like, you know, many of our sisters don't feel like they can't walk down the street without being accosted by a man. Although I would caution against delusional security. You know, women still are sexually assaulted in the United States of America every 20 something seconds or something like that. So this idea that there's not even a protection, man for protection, for what? No, I think that would be, a miscalculation, actually. You know, I think it's, and it says nothing about women being weak or vulnerable. Men are creeps. No, I'm just kidding. No, there are certain risks that our sisters assume when they move about. You know, just, you know, within the general public. That's still a very real thing. Right? So I don't want to speak to that like that's nothing. But because there is within the lives of many a general stability, it would be very easy for a woman to say, a man for protection? Protection for what? Man, just kind of your basic suburban person living in Naperville or something like that. Protected from what? I have my cell phone. If something happens, I'll call 911. So I don't need a man to protect me, right? And then provision, we have a society of upwardly mobile women that work and that earn, and it would be very easy for them to say, I don't need a man to, provide for me, right? Now, saying that you don't need that, it's not the same thing as saying that you wouldn't appreciate it, that you don't want it, but the need is not there in the same way. And, many people, many social commentators, there was an article written in the Atlantic like 4 or 5 years ago called "The End of Men," saying with the changing of the American workforce, like they were actually saying, what is masculinity? Like, what is there a need for what does it mean? What is its value? And they were kind of like saying that, there's no need for any of that anymore. I think they were overshooting that a little bit, maybe a little bit, right? But yeah, I think that I'm saying all of that to say, yes, some of what you describe is a real thing in terms of necessity. However, what we have to be thinking about is companionship. If you want companionship, what will the basis of that companionship be? Even if there is no necessity. Now, in terms of what men have traditionally relied on women for, we still very much, we cannot conceive children, right? We cannot, there's nothing we can do, you know what I'm saying? In terms of what men traditionally have relied on women for, women are still very much in demand for that purpose. But if we're thinking about companionship, then it becomes not so much what I need from you or what you need from me. What is the best way for us as people to build a mutually enriching partnership companionship? And that's just really where we are, I think, as a community of 21st century Muslim moderns, right? What makes you feel, what do you think is the best expression of who you are? What do I think is the best expression of who I am as a man and my wife as a woman? And how do we, put that together in a way that we're both satisfied with and create hopefully a long-lasting, stable home and relationship for our children? But you're right, society is not going to determine a lot of that. There's a lot of choice, a lot of flexibility, a lot of autonomy that people feel. And that companionship now, it has to be something intentional. It has to be something you want to do, right? It might not be something that that you feel necessary in the same way that people 400 or 500 years ago felt it necessary. I think that's a reality. Right. Now you asked the question about distrust. I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, I'm not courting right now. I've been married for. I've spent 15 years of my life, in total as a married man. So I really don't know what the scene is out there, man. Babe, I ain't looking to get married, man. My wife was. I don't know. I don't know how the scene is out there. I don't know. I don't know what's happening, but I do know it is much better to speak to individuals than to speak to just ideals that may or may not be relevant to those individuals, right? Talking about like the ideal Muslimah, the ideal Muslim man. I just don't expect one to get very far with that. It's very, I don't know, it's like whatever, but talking to the individual that you're interested in about what they want, what are their expectations, what do they see as, roles that lead to harmony, contentment, enrichment, love, peace, mercy. I think we're just living at a time where we have to be very specific about those things. The good thing is that there's a wide, wide world out there. We're more connected now than ever. So whatever your flavor, I'm sure you can find someone who has a similar flavor. If your flavor is like, I'm really looking for a woman to, pay for everything, do all the work, I just want to stay home with my kids, I'm sure you can find somebody that works for you. Probably won't be anybody I know. But I mean, I'm sure you can find someone that's like, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a stay-at-home dad. And if and the opposite, I'm sure is also true. If someone's like, I have really, my job is just the most important job of rearing my children, creating peace and tranquility in my household, and that's it for me. I'm sure you can find someone that jives well with that. And what I've seen work more often is something of an integrated approach. You know what I'm saying? It can seem strange because it's not black and white, right? So my wife is an educated woman. She's capable and likes to exercise those skills. I knew that when I met her. So the idea that she wants to work outside the home, I'm very comfortable with that. She's worked outside the home the majority of our marriage, and she also esteems certain traditional roles. So I still have to pay for everything, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, I just kind of how it's working, you know what I'm saying? And actually, see, for me, I don't mind that because I see benefit in my son and my daughters learning from a woman like her. So it's so the fact that my wife, but now my wife, she also esteems certain traditional, roles of say a homemaker. So she does prepare dinner most nights. I mean, if I'm preparing dinner, it's probably gonna be hot dogs. There'll be hot dogs, but then it's probably gonna be hot dogs. But, the kids probably eating cereal. If I'm making cereal, this is good. This is good. But so most nights she will probably prepare dinner. We kind of split the domestic chores just because I'm very particular about the way I like things kept. So sometimes she'll wash the dishes, sometimes I wash the dishes. So it's just man, just finding something that works, man. Finding something that works, and I think that we have to be open to this being, a little more dynamic than somebody that's thinking that this is just going to be just like the 8th century or the 9th century. Probably not. Probably not. I mean, probably not. That's what I'm guessing. Probably not. And even, I mean, the Prophet ﷺ, he served his family. He served his family. So even this idea that the domestic sphere is completely the woman, I actually don't think that is even reflected in our, tradition. So yes, that's a very complex way of saying I don't know. Find a good sister and make it work, man. Make it work. Make it work. So, and I'm sure you have things that you also need, require, expect. That's one thing that I plan on telling both of my daughters that you also want you want him to be inspired to be. My daughters, inshallah, married brothers, so give him an opportunity to be inspiring in his own mind. So even if you know how to change a tire, let him get out there and change. He wants to show you, oh, baby, got a flat tire, I can do this. Let him do that. He wants to do that. You know what I'm saying? He wants to feel that he can be of use, he can be of service. You know what I'm saying? One of my elders, he told me, finding a man that doesn't want to work is like finding a child that doesn't want to play. You know that something is wrong with him. Right? If you see a child that has no interest in playing, then okay, something must be wrong with this child. If you find a man that has no interest in working, right? I just want to sit around and let you do all the work. Something is probably wrong with that man. So let him express his desire to be helpful, to be of service, to provide, to protect. I think all of those things are very important. More important than maybe we realize. Wallahu a'lam. Wallahu a'lam. So, I don't know. We have many sisters here. Maybe they have. You're asking the wrong person. Maybe you should ask them. Sisters, why is there such a distrust of brothers these days? They can tell you. I don't know. Yeah. Mm.
From my understanding with my friends and coming from your family, there was a generation where it's a lot of media and a lot to be seen and how they have to be flooded with a lot of media. So, and they talk about like a lot of like information, emotion, values that you guys are just trying to teach, like what women is saying, and other women that hear, and what the message that I think that comes to what we're not saying. And sort of that generational difference that I've noticed, even while traveling. I go to Iowa and I do young kids my age who are younger than me, 17, 18, and they're literally already engaged in marriage. They're having conversations, and I feel like this conversation that we spoke here in the West, you go to the East, this kind of thing is different.
Yeah, sure.
That's what I'm going to ask you too. Even there are grandparents, but now my community, like a friend of diaspora, I would like leave somewhere else, maybe go somewhere, go to church. Really big, like to grow up in Turkey, having a lot going on, and growing up here was very difficult. So, that's what I'm going to do my conversation.
Interesting. See, I have two feelings about that. On the one hand, I identify with what you're saying. I mean, the things that we believe most deeply are the things that not only are they beyond questioning, we don't even think to question them. So if you ask, most Americans about the desirability of open elections and democracy, it's not even something we think about. It's like we have an intrinsic belief. We have an intrinsic belief in the value of democracy. It's just something that we get in our milk. Right? It's just a lot of Muslims don't realize there are many places where people believe in Islam in a similar way. Like it's not even, that's one of the things I really appreciated about living in Egypt for as long as I lived in Egypt. That it's not even a lot of these kind of, now maybe that's changing, post-revolution, and someone told me that atheism is actually making substantial gains in the majority Muslim world. But when I lived there, for a lot of people, the debate started after belief in God. That was something that was like, come on, man. Like we don't even need to debate that. Right? It's and it would be shocking to me because you would have like these Western Muslims. We have on our robes, we have on our turbans, we have beards down to our navels, and we're having these debates like about God and the existence of God, and science, and string theory, and man, an Egyptian guy in a cafe, man, smoking a shisha that hasn't prayed in probably 10 years, like, Wujud Allah, astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh, Allah mawjud. It's like God's existence. Of course God exists, astaghfirullah. Like for him, that's like that's a core belief that holds the life together. Like without belief in God, for that meant life becomes unintelligible. Like huh? You understand what I'm saying? I sometimes want my children to experience that. I want my children to have belief that is firm in that way. Like, of course, things that we believe in as Americans, like, of course, like I said, democracy, open elections, of course, that presidents have 4-year terms, of course. It's like, these are things we believe in, of course, that individuals have inalienable rights. Of course, that's like, if you're a Western person, of course, right? Human rights, of course. I want my children to experience a world where they can believe in Islam in that way. Like Muhammad Rasulullah, of course. Like at the same time, what I fear about moving overseas is that whenever, and this could just be me, because again, I have my own, particular circumstance, but I'm a Black American, right? And whenever I'm overseas, I always feel like I'm in someone else's movie. Like I don't feel, it's almost like I no longer, like my voice, my thoughts, my opinions, they just become less important. It's like, this is not really it's almost like in America, as far as Islam is concerned, all of us, we are in lead roles. We are the Muslim Americans. All of us, Desi, Arab, Black, Continental African, Indonesian, Malaysian, we are the American Muslims. Where Islam goes in America will be the outcome of what we do. Right? This is our narrative. We have our hands around it. Right? When I'm in Egypt, it's not like that. It's like wherever they take Islam in Egypt is where it's going. Wherever it's going is I'm just there. You know what I'm saying? It's like I'm just a part of the crowd. I don't really have, the best I can do is support them in what they want to do. They say but I don't, and I always feel that lack of purpose. My purpose is not the same. I don't feel as purposeful. I feel, what I feel like whenever I'm abroad, and I lived abroad, right, for a very long time, I would say to myself, there are things that I love about Egypt, for instance, but then there are things that I don't really like, and I have no power to culturally change them. So one thing I noticed, and this is, I think American Muslims this is like, when you talk about American Islamic culture, one of the things that I love about American Islamic culture is that in America, you have people that are very successful in their worldly affairs, but also very religious. And religious scholarship is not seen as something that underachievers in society aspire toward. That's not a part of my culture. You actually, this is like, to me, it's like shocking. I actually know people insanely wealthy. We're talking 8-figure incomes. We can argue. And if I say, call Allah wa call Rasul, God said, his messenger said, they will defer to me and stand down. I'm worth 20 million, but he has the knowledge. I'm always like, damn, that really works. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm worth 20 million. He studied, man. This guy has knowledge. He's right and I'm wrong. In Egypt, many people look at religious folks, people that study Islam. These are people that are these are the low, underachieving. These are the people who couldn't do anything else. They couldn't be engineers. They couldn't be doctors. They couldn't be lawyers. They couldn't work in agriculture. Mullahs, whatever. I don't want my children to experience that, a culture where religiosity is somehow linked to societal failure. Being unimportant, invisible. In America, that's not a part of our religious culture. You actually have, I know many people, Huffaz of Quran, physicians. People that's a part of our religious culture. That are people and people who, again, come from very well-to-do families. They respect religious scholars. They respect religious scholarship. Where it's kind of like, I want my children to have that culture. I don't want them to think like you can either choose, you can be religious or you can be successful. What's it going to be? You can be respected in society or respected in the religious community. No, I think that I like that aspect of American stuff, right? The other thing that concerns me when I think about moving abroad is kind of like, why give up now? Why give up now? Because whenever I'm abroad, I feel like now there's nothing wrong with hijrah. There's nothing wrong with hijrah. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made hijrah with the intention of returning. Right? He never, even when he sent the Sahaba radiallahu anhum jami'an to East Africa, when he sent them to Abyssinia, he didn't go to Abyssinia. Right? The Prophet said, when they said the persecution is just too much, the Quraysh, they're just too repressive, too oppressive. He said, there's a king in a land near ours who is just and righteous. If you go to him seeking refuge, he will give you refuge. And he was referring to the Najashi. He was referring to that kingdom, right? In present day Ethiopia, Sudan, Eritrea, and he sent them there, but he himself didn't go. Even though the Prophet, ﷺ, he was the most severely persecuted of all of the Muslims. Of course, he's the Prophet. Why didn't he go? They went. He sent them, okay, this is too much for you. Go. Why didn't he go? Because his mission was there. See, for them to go symbolizes what? The persecution has become too much. For him to go means what? He's given up. The mission, he has aborted the mission. I can't do this. These people are trying to kill me. I'm trying to call them to Allah. I'm out of here. See, he can't leave. He only goes to Medina, still in the Arabian Peninsula, and then he engages them in combat, right? With the goal of my mission is here. In America, I feel like our mission is here. My mission is here. My mission is a mission of Islam in America. This is my mission. My mission is here. If I move to Senegal, we love Senegalese, mashallah. What I'm saying is what? I've aborted the mission. I can't handle the mission. I can't, forget it. Forget the mission. I can't do it anymore. And my thing is, why give up? Now, we can have a real focused conversation. If people say, look, the mission is here, but we're just losing too many of our children to kufr. Too many of our children are becoming disbelievers. We can't do it. Then I would say, those of us who think they can't handle it should migrate. Those of us that feel like we're losing our children, right? We have to get out of here. But those of us who think we can actually, handle it, that we can build cultures inside of which our children can thrive as Muslims in this land, it's our responsibility to stay. And I would respect anything that anyone chooses. If a person says, bro, it's too much, man. The cost is just, I can't risk it. I can't risk it. I can't risk it. I would not look down on them. If you said, I can't risk it, man. I got to get out of here. Like the risk of my child becoming a disbeliever, I have to leave. I respect that. I respect that.
I don't know because she gave an example of her. Actually, when you were giving an example from Egypt, I think we're quite opposite of Egypt. Like, for example, in Turkey, it's a perfect example to give one. Like, there are so many Islamic scholars, also like brain surgeons, or like
No.
you can find whatever you're up to. Also, like you can go to really non-Islamic schools. Like,
Yeah, I've been to Turkey.
It's really up to you, but there are so many opportunities that support you to be educated in this world and educated for hereafter.
I think every place is different.
Yeah.
Every place is different. I do realize that.
Situation.
Every place is different. That was one of the things that I loved about Turkey, actually. I visited Turkey and I saw that, Turkish people, mashallah, they still have some sultaniya, they have some izzah with Islam. And that was one of the most enjoyable, because I think we had come from Paris. We'd been to Paris, and there are many places that when you tour Europe, even though the societies are very secular, you still get to revisit a kind of the glory of Christendom. These cathedrals and these huge churches and those khadam, I know I'm not saying it right, but you still get to like revisit the glory of Christendom. That's how we feel when we go to Turkey. And we walk around Turkey, we feel like we get to revisit the glory of classical Islamic civilization, right? You go to Suleymaniye, and you get to visit like.
Also, if you go to another city, you can be very similar.
And you cannot see any of that.
It's really.
It's up to the person. It's up to the person. Everything is available everywhere. And I think I would summarize my answer by saying, if a person decided to migrate, I totally would respect that. And if someone decided to stay, I would totally respect that. But it happens more some places than others, for sure.
Growing up in where like Skokie and like they're like one of the only three exactly out of like how many students, and like all kind. Also like it's not a non-understory out there within that about. Also the different, also the more like all of their own stuff.
No, I mean, again, I think, yeah, those kinds of norms are important. Like to have children that have, norms. Like this is just normal. However, I do think there is also value in nonconformity and being able to go against the grain. There's value in that. I think that you experience something different in your faith. So I always joke with people, whenever I'm out and I'm looking for a place to pray, right? I'm out, I'm shopping or whatever, and I'm like, I need somewhere to make salah. It's time for Asa. It's time for Dhuhr. I need to pray. Usually I pray like in a fitting room at a store or something like that. And the dilemma is that if you go to the really nice stores, they have a very attentive staff. So they're like, should we bring a 32? Sami Allahu liman hamida. Okay, I'll bring a 34. You're right. And then if you go to the cheaper stores, they don't have the nice enclosed fitting rooms. They have the fitting rooms, but like you can still see under the bottom. So you don't want someone to think like, yo, what are you doing, man? You're trying to look at it, it's like, oh my God. And I always think somebody in Iraq, for instance, doesn't even have this dilemma. There's a musalla, right? They don't even have that. That doesn't even happen. Every Muslim that is working in business, who is explaining to their colleagues, I am also happy we closed the deal, but I don't drink. Right? As they're ordering champagne, ordering wines. And this is maybe not going to happen to somebody in Saudi. Right? That's a given, that's a known. I do think that you experience something different in your faith when you have to be very intentional about your faith. Where it's kind of like, I'm a Muslim, and everything in society reminds me I'm a Muslim, right? Whereas if I live in Egypt, a lot of stuff is like, it's just a given. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, we're all Muslim, right? Even like you were saying, being in Skokie, being one of those only identifiably Muslim people. What I find cool about that even is like how significant it is to greet one another. If I'm coming down the street and I see another Muslim, I'm like, Salaam alaikum. And there is something enjoyable about just encountering another Muslim. I'm in Egypt. You know, everybody's Muslim. We're all Muslim here. You know what I mean? Well, not everyone, but most people are. You know, I think you get a chance to experience some of what the Sahaba, may God be pleased with them, what they experienced, right? I think that, and again, it is not for the faint of heart. I agree. But one thing that I would say, hopefully as some assurance, there's a good book called Conversion to Islam in the Medieval Period by a non-Muslim academic named Richard Bullitt. But he talks about how in the period that many of us identify as like classical Islamic, those societies were ruled by Muslims, but they were majority non-Muslim. Like Iraq and Egypt, conversion to Islam happened very gradually, right? Islam was never spread by the sword. Islamic rule might have been spread by the sword, right? People fought, they conquered territories, but the personal religious conversion of those people happened over generations and generations and generations. It wasn't like, so even a lot of the great Muslims whose names we celebrate, they lived in majority non-Muslim societies. A lot of us don't realize that. The majority of people were, when Imam Ghazali, for instance, was in present-day Iraq, the majority of those people were like Magians, Zoroastrians. The majority of them were not Muslim, which is one of the things that made that intellectual culture of the Muslims so robust, is they were trying to find ways of explaining Islam to the people around them. That's what, because when Islam was in the Arabian Peninsula, there was no schools of fiqh. They didn't have any schools of aqidah. They didn't have these deep, systematized ways of teaching Arabic, learning Arabic. Islam was something they just had in their milk, which is a natural thing. Like, everybody Muslim. Like, they actually knew the language of the Quran. Like, Allah said this. Everybody knows that. It's only as Islam begins to move into North Africa, move into West Africa, move into Sub-Saharan Africa, move into Indochina, move into India, move into Central Asia, Islam has to develop. Why? Because now the Muslims are encountering people that have traditions of philosophy, traditions of learning, now Islam has to develop so that it can engage those people in society, right? We have to do the same thing. This is our mission, right? And that's why it's almost like I said, it's not for the faint of heart, but really our mission is to develop a way of talking about the realities of Islam in a way that our neighbors and our colleagues, a way that they understand. Now, I'll give you just a hint. I think in the time in which we live, not really about those intellectual questions like in the previous age. It's really about culture. That's what it's about. It's really about culture. That's what it's soft power. It's who is able to say something about the human condition through the culture they create. This is who rules today. Right now, the West is the preeminent power in the world because they have the most to say about culture, right? They have the most to say about what's cool, what's beautiful, what's inspiring, what's free, what's progressive. They define that, so they rule the world. This is the truth. You see what I'm saying? This is the truth, right? We now have to say, okay, if we have something to say about those things, we have to create the culture that says what we want to say about those things. Then we'll really have no problem with being ourselves in America. But it's a steep hill, man. it's a steep hill. It's a steep hill. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم تقبل صيامنا وقيامنا. اللهم تقبل صيامنا وقيامنا وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. آمين يا رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خيرا.